Welcome, everybody. My name is Philip Cuenco, and I am a Academy instructor and producer for the Leica Academy here in the United States. Today, we have a very special guest from Los Angeles. We have our next guest, Stefon Vanasco. Now, Stefon is known for a various amount of work. He's not just a photographer that does one type of thing. He does street photography. He's also known for his approach into the abstract side of things, his aerial photography, and of course his modeling work. So without further ado, Stefon Vanasco.
What's going on, everybody? What's going on, Phil?
How's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me be a part of this. It's definitely some interesting times we're going through, and very happy to hear that Leica Academy and Leica Camera USA are offering these programs to get the photography community together in one way or another, just to share and just have good conversations and hopefully inspire one another. I'll just give the rundown while we look at some images. Started doing photography about almost 20 years ago. Just was a random opportunity that I had through a job at the time that enabled me to buy my own camera and do some of the photography work for that company. But what happened was it grew into a passion. I came from skateboarding in the early 90s, and when I was doing that, skateboarding to me was everything. It was like, that's all I needed in my life. As I got older, things changed. You grow, you get responsibilities, but I rediscovered that same feeling of independence and freedom and creativity that I had through skateboarding with photography. So the idea of this thing just kept growing, and I wanted to see where it would take me, so I just kind of put my heart, put everything into photography and just followed that path. And, here I am, a couple of decades later, still doing it, still loving it, still having fun, and very thankful to have something in my life that fulfills me like this, and all the great people that I got to meet.
That's great. And a lot of your modeling work, it started getting in towards more of an abstract side of things, like this one here, and it takes us into your abstract world. How did you start discovering a pursuit into that?
Well, I think you photograph something enough times over and over where to a degree you've proven to yourself that you know what you're doing with this particular type of photograph or subject matter or framing. So I think it was just, a challenge to me, like, how do I do this different, or how do I mix these different elements of photography that I'm a fan of? I'm a fan of, like you said, abstract fine art. And I really do believe that when you start to learn and embrace and study other formats of photography, it lends itself to be able to blend into other subject matter. It was just, rather than keep doing a formula that I've already had been doing with the portraits or the model work, I wanted to do something that was a little bit more challenging, I guess, to myself. So I was like, let me just try blending these aesthetics together.
Absolutely. I'll give you the first question that someone has put in the Q&A window for us. And that question is, Stefon, can you think of or share what's your most memorable picture you've taken so far in your career?
Dang, that's like, I think for any photographer, that's like asking them to pick a photo of like pick their favorite child or something. As far as other ones, I mean, I think the idea of the favorite photograph keeps evolving. It's never just one set in stone for time, because I think you got to push yourself to find like that next thing that inspires you, the next thing that makes you feel kind of completed about what you're doing.
It's great how you separate the shadows and the whites. Are you using monochrome for the most part nowadays, or color, or does it really matter to you?
I think I've been using the monochrome camera probably since 2013. The first one I bought was the M9 monochrome, and I really enjoy those cameras because to me it's like this purest form of digital. Like, there's absolutely no need to worry about color. Like, if you shoot black and white film, it carries on that same principles and philosophies, I think. But I think once you kind of learn to start identifying uses of light and shadows, you can do that with a regular M10P or M240. But, I think it's all about using the camera or the gear that just inspires you to go make photographs, regardless of its price point or size or medium. Like, whatever you pick up to go make photographs with, that's what it is. And for me, the monochrome cameras from Leica have definitely been that for the past 7 years. I also like when using the monochrome cameras that you could use the yellow, orange, red filters on it like you would with a film camera. And control some of the highlights and, the color tones within the image. It's good.
There we go. That's great. Where's this one taken?
It's just like a alleyway in New York. I was walking around the financial district with a buddy of mine one day, and just turned a corner, walked down, and just saw the way the light was hitting. And I shot this with my MP and used some of that Ferrani P30 film. So it has like a heavy shadow fall off. It handles light, in a great way. So I don't know. I just love what I saw between like the lines coming out from the bottom, shortening up as they go top, the light kind of like curving in. I don't know. It's just a fun image to make, I think.
We come to a point in your career where you start to decide printing. What was that trigger moment for you where you're like, we have to take it off the screen?
Really, it wasn't even a career point type of thing. It was just the idea of, this is like 2009, 2010 when I bought my first printer at home. And I think it was just this traditional philosophy that if, you're a photographer, you make photographs, you should be printing them. So for me, it was just the idea of like, I want to make my photos tangible. To a degree, it was also, I want to gift some of these images that I'm making with friends and family. I want to share these memories with them in a physical form. And then also at the same time, I think like any young person, living on their own, having their own place, you want to have, I guess, cool artwork to hang. I couldn't really afford the type of art or pieces that I was like really interested in. So I was just under the impression I could just make my own photographs of things that I thought that was cool and print and hang them up. And it was fun because you went from printing your image and also like, self-framing at home was kind of fun, and stepping back and seeing the piece on the wall. That was really what started it, was just this idea of, I want to share what I'm doing with photography in a physical form. And I want to, if I have a portrait of a friend of mine, I want to give it to them. I don't want to email them an image. I just want to share the tangible idea of this.
Tom, looks like we've got some questions building up. Do you have any on deck that you
Sure.
have right now?
Maybe one that's on topic here. Stefon, do you have a recommendation on how you approach black and white and color? Do you go out for a day with the idea that you're going to shoot just black and white? Do you have a monochrome on one arm and an SL on the other? Do you shoot them interchangeably?
Yeah, sometimes when I do go out, I'll carry, whether it's like an M10 monochrome and an M10P, or one MP with color film, one MP with black and white film. Because for me, looking at black and white, it's stripping the color. Like the color doesn't play the primary role, I think, in black and white. You're looking more at use of light, use of shadows, pure subject matter. You're not distracted by, the red hat or the red dress someone's wearing. It's all that's removed. So I think when I approach black and white, that's what I'm looking at. That's how I'm seeing things. But there are moments when you're walking around and the use of color does play a role, and it does play this thing in making a photograph a certain way. But that's like an interesting part, because for me, it's like, how do you make an image that the viewer isn't totally distracted by in color? Like sunsets are the prime example. Sunsets can mostly be a lot of photos of nothing. It's just this beautiful palette of orange and purples and reds in the sky, and that's what the viewer sees. That's the primary focus. But how do you shoot that in a way that there's more to it than just look at that color in the sky?
So Stefon, is how much of that for you, percentage-wise, happens in the moment you're shooting, in terms of determining whether you're going to shoot black and white or color, versus how much of it is post-processing or a decision you make later?
It's all in the moment. So if you're talking about the color aspect, like these days, it has to be a really intriguing setting or framing or what's going on that would make me want to shoot color. Because I put more thought, I guess, into the color. The black and white, I've been working with it so much that I'm more identifying with what I'm seeing in a stripped down version, if that makes sense. Digital, you say the SLs or, the M10Ps, like that's the one thing I will tell people about working with Leica digital cameras. The coloring out of your guys' sensors is the best, in my opinion. So you don't have to do much to it. It's a really smoother process where you're not worrying about how do you adjust this or that. Like the colors are very true to what you see. And I think that's one of the best things about working with your guys' digital cameras.
So we're getting a lot of questions about your printing process, and I know you and Phil have a plan of taking us through your workflow. Before we get there, though, can you, it's a Leica Academy program, Leica Camera USA program, we'd be remiss if we didn't have you share your Leica story. How did, you didn't start shooting Leica, I don't think. How did you come to shooting Leica?
So how I came to shooting Leica was, I think you just kind of start hearing about this brand, all these like iconic and timeless photographs have been made with these cameras. The amount of amazing photographers have used these cameras, but then you see the price point, so it's like, oh my gosh, well, like, is it true? Like what's the point of these price points? I don't get it. My first Leica that I got was through the boutique at Sammy's Camera in LA. And it was a used M6 with the Canadian 35 Summicron version. And he was like an icon to that store. Is that Tibor worked over there, so he sold it to me, and that was the first Leica that I got. So I think coming off of the heels of shooting a lot of digital stuff, like DSLRs, and just being so into that world of autofocus, everything autofocus, auto exposure, and shutter priority, all that stuff. What really intrigued me with the Leica stuff was the rangefinder focusing. It was just fun. I felt more interactive. I felt more a part of the photograph. So hearing, okay, they make digital cameras with the same philosophy was very exciting. So after I got my M240, I was hooked, because even in the digital scope of shooting with the Leica, you're more part of your image than letting the autofocus software of these DSLRs, in a sense, make the photo for you.
Well, I want to turn it back over to Phil so you guys can get into printing. But before we get there, I'm going to paraphrase one of the questions here, and I know it's one of Phil's favorite questions to ask photographers. If you could only have one camera and lens, what camera would have to be, would somebody have to pry away from you?
I think there's a lot of good cameras, but this is like my daily one. It's a MP with a 50 APO Summicron. I take this thing everywhere with me. I bought it brand new about 4 or 5 years ago, and it's kind of cool to see the wear and tear coming on. Even like the lens, you can kind of see that, I use this thing, and this is everything to me. Yeah, so I would say this one.
Nice. All right, so we got the film questions and hardware out of the way for all the gearheads out there. Well, we're gonna get back into printing. You started getting into the street and mixing all these types of mediums that you're photographing. Where'd you take it from there once you decided,
So it was, like I said, so printing started out with just for myself to look at it, because I think what people kind of like forget is when you print the image out and you see it, whether it's an 8x10 or a 13x19, whatever size, you can understand your photography a lot better when you start printing. So like I was telling you, I started kind of like just as a way to share my work, to gift it to friends and people. Then comes like this next little step of when you start getting invited to maybe participate in group showings with your other photographer friends or whatever art outlets there is. So now comes another learning curve through printing, which is understanding how your work, if you're shooting different subject matters, you're working with different mediums, how they sit and they work well with one another. I mean, I think most people, when they start out, you're going to do a group show, most people tend to just pick maybe a variety pack, 10 or so of their favorite images. They don't necessarily speak to one another. They're just like, I just like these 10 photographs that I've made. But I think the more you start to print and the more you start to look at your photographs, you start to understand and see a lot of shared similarities in different things you make. So I think that was like the next step after initially just, doing it just to be able to give it out, was I'm starting to do a little bit of gallery showings. I'm making my own selections, stepping back and asking myself, does this make sense? Do these work together? Do they speak to one another? And then how do I improve upon that?
I guess we can get into paper. Want to get into paper right now?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, because paper is such an intriguing thing, because that's the thing that learning too is, the paper that you use for your photographs or that you come to like that's a signature style of yours, I would say. If people can recognize that someone shoots, say, a 24mm lens all the time, using a certain kind of paper is just as important as the lens you pick, the subject matter you're doing, because it's that final extension of your work that when people start seeing prints and they start buying prints, they're going to recognize like, oh, that's got to be that person's work because that's the paper they use and that's the sizing they do or the cropping. There's a lot more to it, than just simply making a print. It's exploring the paper types.
Right. Now, what you guys are looking at here, these are actual physical prints that Stefan took pictures of. Stefan, why don't you take us into the differences between the two? I know there's a slight difference, but they're there.
The one on the right is made with Moab Slick Rock Metallic Pearl. I wanted to see how this image would come out. So you can kind of see the blacks and some of the spots feel a little bit deeper. And obviously papers have, different temperature holdings to them. So the one on the right feels a lot warmer than the one on the left. The one on the left is more of a matte. So if you look at, say, the rooftop to the right of the Staples Center, you can kind of see, through the shadows a little bit better than you can on the right. And it's also understanding the textures of the paper. It's understanding the temperatures of the paper. And when you make a certain image in your head, once you start working with stuff that you like, you're going to know the end result a lot quicker than testing 5, 6, 8 different papers.
Right. Now, in these particular ones, is this Moab like a green? Is it grainy? Is it slick? Is it glossy?
Well, the one on the right, you can't tell due to the way I photographed it, but it's more of like a glossier type of finish. The one on the left is more matte. So if you're hanging these up on the wall, obviously you would get less reflection from the one on the left. But some people prefer glossy print, when it comes to artwork in their home. It's just experimenting. It's experimenting the same way you would with your camera, trying different ISO speeds, shutter speeds. So I think it is good and it is important for people to jump around and explore different papers to see like what it results into their work.
That sizing here.
Yes, scale is also an important thing too. Understanding like the impact of the image. Sometimes with landscape, aerial work, obviously the bigger you go, the more you can feel into the image, I would say. You can kind of sense the scale of it better and stronger than you would of something, of smaller size. So the one on the right is an 11 by 14. The one on the left is a 17 by 22. So I think that's another important thing when offering your work to people or having a show is looking at the subject matter and trying to play with the idea of which greater impact you'll have with the size of the paper you're working with.
Do you use like glass over your frames or non-reflective, or do you prefer to display open?
I mean, that's a whole different thing to get deeper into. What I've learned is, some papers have brighteners in them. So if it says bright white on them or anything like that, they have a component in them that reacts from the sunlight to make them brighter and more white. Sometimes if you use the UV glare protective glass, then you're cutting out that element of the paper. Now the paper is not going to be exactly what you thought. Me personally, I'm very traditional. I love just the idea of matting, white frame, and just a good glass that doesn't, ideally you don't want that much reflection, but that costs way more when you do that. But I like that traditional format of hanging a print. But then there's so many other ways I've explored printing on aluminum. I've explored, poster mounting. Like there's so many different ways you can share your prints these days.
All right, we got some sequences here going on.
Yeah, that's the fun part. So going back to this idea of like, say you want to have a show, maybe it could be a book, whatever it may be, you want to put a group of images together to showcase. So what's fun about printing is like in your head, I want to go 13 by 19. You don't have to do every test print at 13 by 19. You could do some of them at 5 by 7, like you see here. And now if you lay them out on the table, it's kind of like a puzzle, like which ones go together, which ones flow together. If there's color in the images, how do the colors speak with one another? So I think that's the fun part is sequencing. It's just understanding. Again, it goes back to looking at your work. And if you were to group these images together to hang on a wall somewhere, how would they speak to the viewer if the viewer knows nothing about you? Like this one, for example, is the idea of the colors are fairly similar. The one on the right was made with the MP using Cinestill 50D. The one on the left I made with the S007 system, but the colors are fairly relatable. So, in the idea of sequencing them, they could speak well to one another.
It's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the fun part. It's like you're exploring your work in a different way.
Now, when you actually, Tom, looks like we have a lot more questions. You want to?
Sure. Let me throw just a few more printing specific questions. And then, you know what, Phil, we'll do, when we get a little bit further into the half-hour point, let's do a lightning round of questions. Stefan, I'll just throw a whole bunch of stuff at you in terms of all the questions in the list. But related to printing, why is it important to you to print this work yourself versus sending it out to a lab? Why go to the trouble? Why do you do it?
Well, I mean, I think that's the beauty of digital technology these days, is that a lot of things are more easily accessible to us. I mean, we're not in the days of, you know, I mean, you can still use an enlarger, you can still do traditional darkroom prints, but I mean, just be able to have these amazing quality inkjet printers at your disposal to make your work, rather than email an image, have to wait a couple of days for something that you can do on yourself at home. It speeds up the process. My personality, I'm so hands-on with anything I'm into. It's hard for me to relinquish control. Aside from that, I also love learning. The idea of printing your photos is such an extension of photography. Like I would say, after getting your camera that you love shooting photos with, the next important purchase probably should be a printer to start getting into this at home and to start going down this path. So I don't know, I'm just hands-on. I love the control, and I love to be able to like make a print whenever I feel like it. And
Stefan, can you get down to the nitty-gritty a little bit? Like, what were the key tools you had to put in place in order to set up your studio? What printer are you using? What monitor calibration? Yeah. Well, give us a little bit of those specs.
Yeah, so here's some stuff that I learned, because I took one of your guys' academy classes and got to work with a very talented man named David Joseph from Freestyle.
Eric Joseph from Freestyle. Yep. Eric
Joseph. You're right. Eric Joseph from Freestyle Photo. He put me on to layers of game in the sense of printing. So the idea too is, what color format do you work in? There's sRGB, and then there's Adobe RGB. Those are two things. So the sRGB is if you're going to format or finalize an image for screens, laptops, cell phones, you want to kind of go off that color grade. If you're going to be printing your images, Adobe 1998 RGB is what you want to do, because you're going to see the truer colors go from your screen to what's coming out of your printer. That's one thing. Another initial importance to do is, whenever you buy paper, so even for example, you want to try papers like Moab, for example, has sample packs. You can get that. You go to their website, you download the ICC profiles for the printer model that you have. That way, when you're printing, you're squaring up. I'm using this type of paper. I'm going to line it up with the profile that makes sense for it. That way, when it comes out, it's going to make more sense to you. But going back to other details, so ICC profiles are important. Understanding the colors that you're working with, Adobe versus sRGB, is important. Calibrating your monitor is important. I've used the Spider ones from Datacolor. That's been pretty good. I've been using this one from X-Rite. This one's really good. I enjoyed what I've been getting from them. Even monitors too. I use a BenQ monitor versus just like a standard, I have an iMac Pro, versus just relying on the iMac Pro. I wanted something that had more latitude in the scopes of colors I was looking at. So the BenQ monitors are really good. I mean, there's so many more layers deeper, because again, like a company like Freestyle Photo, they'll custom make the ICC profile for a paper you love using for your exact printer, versus using just the general one that can be downloaded from all the paper companies.
Awesome.
Yeah. Percentage-wise, how much are you shooting film versus digital now?
For the past 2 or 3 years, I've probably been 90% film and then 10% digital.
Why?
I think it was just, with the impact of social channels and digital, like digital, you're just pumping stuff out because it's there. You can do it. You can shoot 500 photos in a day, and you can pump it out, onto your Instagram, onto Twitter, whatever. And for me, because I kind of went through that explosion of Instagram where everyone was just rifling off stuff every day, the digital aspect kind of like was starting to get to me a little bit, where it's like, you put this unwanted pressure on yourself to like, I got to make a photo today. And you're forcing it, you're forcing it. Then also there's something to be said about whenever you're making a photograph and you're looking at it, you're kind of eliminating this ability for originality if you keep looking at the screen. I kind of found that if you keep doing that, subconsciously you're referencing another photograph that inspires you. So in your head, you're comparing, is this photo like that? Is it comparable to that? Working with film, it's just a different process. It's, I take my time. When I get it developed, I get it developed. When I look at it, I look at it. And you don't have a screen to look at the back. So it's really imaginative, understanding your f-stops, your shutter speeds, the ISO, the texture of the film you're going to use. How's the grain going to look on it? There's so many more variables that you take into consideration when you make the photograph that it's just, you're more part of it. And then also lastly, one thing too, is just the idea of how do you see the image? Shooting with film, you interpret the image in your head, you capture it through the camera, you get it developed. From there, you look at the negative. From there, you scan the negative in so you see it coming in on your computer again. Then from there, you bring it into Camera Raw or Lightroom. Maybe you're cleaning it up. So there's like so many more steps that you're doing to looking at the photograph before you're done with it, even digitally.
So Stefon, we'll use this as a transition to talk a bit about your creative process. So does the idea you have a lot of projects. Maybe we got some images of your aerial work, and you've traveled, I know you spent the last couple of years traveling around doing that aerial work in different cities. Where your ideas come from and who are you inspired by?
For aerial work, I would probably say what really intrigued me is Fred Lyons' work. He was shooting aerial work years and years ago. And I thought it was intriguing because I think too, what I love about the aerial work is that like you can come at it from an architectural point of view. You can come at it from a storytelling point of view. Because I feel like if you're going to make a book or share a body of work about a city or a place, a few aerial images helps broaden the idea of what the landscape is of this place that you're photographing or you're sharing stories of. So I love this broad range of ability aerial photographs had to whatever you wanted to apply them to. And for me, it's just, it's sharing a different point of view where you're from or where you're visiting. Yeah, like this one right here is flying into Oahu and, just a good window seat. But I mean, I don't know. I feel like, when you have this as an establishing shot, say, of a project, now if you go into the streets or you go shoot the beaches of Waikiki, or Honolulu, like you have this establishing shot that shows the viewer like, well, okay, so this is the landscape. This is how everything's spread out. This is, it helps them identify things a little bit more.
Stefon, a specific question about this picture. Tell us the story behind how this picture was taken.
So there's a pilot that I fly with from time to time. He was actually traveling from, I think, Oregon to LA. He had a stopover in SF. I happened to be up there actually with the visual skate team, and we were able to get a flight together. So I drove out to Oakland Airport, and we flew up, and there was all this amazing as it is in SF, especially like during like the summertime, marine layer fog that was going on. So we just got to work the bridge for 20 minutes or so, like circling it, trying to find different perspectives. I shot this with the SL with the 24-90, so I had some movement to zoom in and out on it. But I mean, I think this bridge is just so iconic to a lot of photographers, and it has all these great symmetrical points to it that I think we all want to strive to try to get something that works. And for me, I was just happy to see that I was able to make this photograph because the fog is like thinning out enough to where you can see the cars driving under. So I mean, trying to make a great photograph of an iconic location or setting is challenging at times. And, I'm just happy people enjoyed this one.
Stefon, can you speak to, there's another question here about, do you follow a discipline for your personal or street shooting? What does your routine look like? So pre-COVID, pre this sort of lockdown, what would your typical daily or weekly routine look like?
It would vary. What I was actually working on, I started it at the beginning of last year, trying to revisit the idea of like how to photograph a city that you live in, that you see all the time. For me, that was Los Angeles. It's such a widespread city that you can easily lose yourself bouncing around to all these different areas, whether it's the beach, whether it's Hollywood, whether it's downtown, whether it's Koreatown, you know, whether it's going up for hikes and mountains. So what I was trying to do for a while was pick an area and just stay there for a month or two and photographing it. There'd be no other idea. I'm not going to go anywhere else. I'm only going here. So, you know, I started out with, you know, Griffith Observatory and the hills back there. So I went and shot there for like a month and a half, 2 months, because I wanted to see that the more time you spend in these neighborhoods or places, how does your perception change? And how do you build the body of work as it progressively grows? So I did that area. I did Hollywood Boulevard for a while. I did Santa Monica Pier, Santa Monica area throughout the summer. I was starting to dive into Echo Park, Silver Lake area. So I try to give myself some structure versus bouncing around loosely. And I don't go out with an exact thing, I'm going to shoot this. I kind of like try to let whatever grabs my attention pull me. You know, that gut instinct that we all have. I think it's in photography, you can notice things that are catching your eye subliminally, I think, throughout the day. And I think if you can consciously recognize that as you're in the moment, you just follow that path, and that'll lead you to other photographs that work. And I personally have felt a bit of success with that formula before. So the idea was more or less just locking in an area and not getting distracted about where I'm going to go today, but just that's the project for 4 to 8 weeks. Just go to this one neighborhood and work it until you feel like you've got enough, then you can move on to something else.
So speak to that a little bit in terms of when do you know, 2 questions. When do you know your project's done? It's time to move on to something else. But then also, this relates to some questions we're getting. How do you know when it's time, when a project's ready for you to share through social media? What determines whether you share something or not?
Okay, so I think in the idea of a project, I think it's, you know, there was a great saying, a buddy of mine, he put me onto this interview with this amazing jazz musician, James Matume. And he had this amazing career of playing with Miles Davis, to scoring like pop hits, to transitioning into doing scoring for TV shows and movies. He correlated when he knew it was time to move on for something. He said, when I pick up my guitar and I start playing the same notes that I've been playing for the past 3 years, I'm done with that, time to move on. So I think if you kind of keep going to the same places and you keep shooting the same exact thing that you've already been photographing, like time to push yourself onto something else, whether it's change your focal length. If you shoot with a 50, try a 90, try wider. There's these things that you have to look at your work to recognize when, okay, I got to change something up because I'm just doing the same exact thing I always do. So I think in the body, when you're looking at a body of work, it's like, do I cover a lot of aspects? Do I have a different approach for these different settings? That's my personal take. And I think when posting to social media, which is a similar approach, for me these days, I'll sit on photos for 6 months to a year before I even touch them. And I just look at them, okay, now, okay, I feel good about it. I'll share this. Like, I'm not worried about the rush or the unspoken timely manner that I have to post. For me, it's just, when does the image inspire me and when does it speak to me? And that's the beauty of photography. I think if you make a good image 6 months or a year ago, it'll still be a good image if you post it today. So that's what I've come to understand, at least with my photography, is that there is no need to always rush something. Like, let it breathe, let your eyes breathe when you're looking at it, and understand what it is you want to share, what it is you're doing.
Very good, very good. Hey, Phil, I want to get Phil back in here. Here's something we should try. Why don't we try, I'll start with one question. We're going to do a lightning round, get through a bunch of questions. We're up to 76 total questions here. I don't know that they will necessarily thematically fit, but we're just going to, let's take about, 7-8 minutes here and do this.
All right,
so a question from our product specialist with the Pro Markets product specialist, John Kreidler, wants to know how much time you spend culling and processing and printing as compared to shooting.
Oh, how like the difference? I mean, I would probably say I spend a lot more time processing and getting to the print point. The shooting part, I'm always shooting. So there's always images that I could look back or, that I'll have to go through. Like, even like right for, with going on the stay-at-home mandates in order, I still have a lot of work that I haven't fully looked at to dig into. So I feel thankful in that regard. But yeah, definitely I try to take more time between the selects, the process, and then, putting out a print.
Regarding pricing structure, how do you what you charge?
What do I charge? I think, and this is my belief. Every photographer structures their own price. There is no blueprint. There's no guideline of what to charge. I think whatever you feel that photo is worth to you, say that price. But the biggest thing I will note is it's okay to start inexpensive, cheap, whatever you want to phrase it as. It's okay to start low. Because as you start bettering your work, building your work, selling your work, then that price can only go up. You want to come out the gate and charge an exorbitant amount of pricing for your image, and it doesn't sell, then you're going down. It's like a reverse mode, And also I think it's the idea that in the end, your art, most people's art should be accessible to most people. Try to find a price point for a size that is affordable to most people. Don't price people out of your work, because if they're fans and they're supporting and they love seeing what you make, you're kind of closing a door to this audience that would be willing to have your work hanging in their home and, sharing it with friends and loved ones.
Stefon, speak to that a little bit deeper, because you've been very successful on your online print sales. And is a part of that strategy to keep a specific size as open edition versus larger size as editioned? And can you talk about how you decide what size your editions are going to be?
Yeah, I mean, like, just for me, what I've kind of come across, like the average size that most people setting a price point and what's good for most people is 11 by 14. Because the other thing too is you got to consider people's wall space in their homes. Some people may have big houses, some people living in, condos, apartments. So not everyone has a big wall space dedicated for a big print. So for me, it's just more or less like keep the editions, like, if you want to do an edition where they're numbered and on a certain paper, try to keep them limited as best you can. So I'll try to do maybe 10 or 15 or so. At the same time, if someone is asking for a different size of that image on a different paper, I'm open to that. I note those as artist prints, and they are signed. So there is something to those. But that's the battle I think everyone has to figure out with, again, the access of being able to print digitally as much as you want, is how do you do that without burning out your work or something else, So I think it's learning to manage that control of output, desirability, and, getting people excited and feeling a part of something when they're able to get a print.
So you keep your 11 by 14s open edition most of the time, or it just depends on the project?
No, like that. I've had someone email me today asking about buying prints, because whenever I go to your big cartel, it's sold out because I don't always have my prints that easily available. The one way I do offer prints, and for me, it's a more of an interactive process where someone may email me or DM me, say on Instagram, and they're requesting a print. To me, that's a little bit more engaging than just throwing up the numbered editions on a site and just waiting for them to sell out. One, it's kind of like the secret code almost. Like, you want to get a print from me, message me. You're not going to find a general site where there's always open and always available. And then it's just talking about sizing. Well, what size works for that person? Because again, 11 by 14 might not be the size they want. It may not be great in their home. They might want bigger. They might want smaller. So it's kind of like this fun engagement of one-on-one talking with someone. And then, it's a little bit more, there's a few more steps involved to getting the print done versus payment and shipping and all that kind of stuff. But it works, and I enjoy that engagement.
Now, speaking of payment, like shipping, would you care to talk about what happens once it comes out of the printer and getting it to the customer?
Oh, yeah, so we could definitely jump into that. So, I mean, obviously learning or understanding how to ship prints is very important, because, these are fragile items that could be bent or damaged as they go. So the first step I would say is, my personal take is anything from like a 4x6 up to a 11 by 14. I'll show you what I use. Some people aren't into mailers. I've had pretty good success with them. So I get these mailers. They're from Dotline Corp. Let me see if I can find the camera. Dotline Corp. I buy these from Sammy's. They usually have them available on their website and in store. But right now, since they're not open, they're doing e-commerce. So, these are available at sammys.com. They go from 4x6 to 11x14. It's already got the photo inside, don't bend warning, and it comes with pre-cut cardboard pieces. So you just put your image inside. You can tape it up for even more security, throw it in. That's how to package smaller prints. Bigger prints, I would say 11x17 and up. A little bit of a different story. What I've learned is shipping tubes are the way to go for those. I use the tubes from this company called Yazoo Mills. Very durable. So if they're in this, chances are they're not going to get bent. You can kind of see the diameter of like how thick that core is on it. These are what I would use for shipping larger prints. To get the larger prints rolled up, another thing that I use is Canson makes this glassine paper. It's kind of like a wax butcher paper. So when you have your large print, you cut the sheet around it, and then you would just roll it up, tape it up with some low tack artist tape so it doesn't tear the paper and it doesn't ruin it. But you would roll your print up in this, put it in the tube, stuff it around the sides. The smaller prints, by the way, going back to that really quick, like these poly bags, archival sleeves, I would put the print in that and then put it in these things.
Great, Stefon. We got one of our listeners wondering, are we just making up these questions, or are they really coming from the audience? So let me address that. We're definitely taking the questions from the audience. So let me go to something specific here, which is, what film do you use most? And then also, what's your favorite black and white film?
Oh, wow. So film that I use most, if I'm shooting color, it's like kind of two opposites. I really love the Cinestill 800T. Just like the latitude of that film is great. I've shot it at 800, I've shot it at 6400, and I've gotten good results. The polar opposite to that, maybe I would say, is Ektachrome. I really like. That reminds me of like shooting with like a Leica digital camera, in a sense of like how just vibrant and great the images look. Black and white film, I mean, a top three would be Tri-X 400, HP5 Plus. And then I really love the Ferrania P30 film for black and white. Like those are all kind of all lumped together as choices.
And to go along with the film question, and then Phil, you're up next for the next question here, is talk about your scanning process. Are you developing at home and then scanning at home?
So before, because I would just shoot large volumes of film and bring it to Sammy's, have their lab do it, because I've been going to them for over 15 years. So they would handle my film processing, which has been great. Obviously, with what's going on now, it's a lot different. So I've actually developed my first roll in maybe 15 years, 20 years at home. So I'm going to start exploring that. I use the lab box, which is a really cool device, along with Cinestill Monobath, and everything turned out okay. So I'm going to probably get into that more. But traditionally, I would go get my negs developed, cut and page from Sammy's, bring it home. And then I have two scanners that I would work with at home here. I have the Flex Tight X1, and then I have a Nikon CoolScan 9000. So those would be two scanners I would kind of bounce back and forth with when working on digitizing the negatives. How do you store prints?
There you go. That was the one. Storing the prints.
They've been printed.
Yeah. It was the box he's got over there.
Yeah, let me dig some of these out.
Stefon, I'm gonna throw a question. So back to that edition question, when you sell prints, how many do you sell of one image? 50, 100?
No, I just put it at 10. I don't know, this is small. Like I want people to be excited about it. I think if you're just like, if it's a massively open-ended edition kind of thing, then like, oh, I'll come back to it. Or, I think if you're going to do it, make it exciting for people to like get it while they can. And I don't know, that's the fun part about making your own prints. You control the output.
Phil, you got another question?
Oh, he's got the box, right? Yep.
Yeah. So going back to someone's question, it was about what do you do with the prints after you get them made. So that's the other fun factor is archiving boxes. Real simple, kind of cardboard feeling boxes. You can buy these at Sammy's, B&H, come in a variety of sizes. So once you do that, you could label your box, say if you're shooting New York City, and it could be a group of prints from just New York City. I find this as a great way if you're trying to show someone your work, or if you yourself are trying to go back to an image. to not have to deal with the digital aspect of digging through a hard drive or whatever it may be, just going into this and pulling this out and showing it. And that, again, goes into the impact of, I think, sharing physical work with people. Real quick, this might be a side note. This is another way you can archive your images at home. What's this one? Atoya is a company. They make these little art portfolio binders. So what I found myself doing was, if you're out shooting in the street, shooting in public, and someone comes up to you and starts talking about photography or what are you doing, I've realized that trying to pull this up and go to your Instagram or go to whatever it may be is so cumbersome, versus you hand them this and then they can flip through and look at your work in person right then and there. And it's way more impactful than looking at the images on a little phone screen, you know? So this has been a great thing. You know, this is a 4x6. This fits in most go-to daily camera bags. And I guarantee you, if next time someone talks to you about photography and you have this, the reaction they're going to have is a lot stronger than just swiping and scrolling on a phone.
Now, as far as your inspiration and how you keep your creative juices flowing, we talked about the print a day the other day. Do you want to go ahead and let the viewers know that aren't familiar with that process that you?
Oh, yeah. So as I said earlier, I think if you take the time to process and, you know, negative digital image to a point to where you want to share it on a social channel, well, you might as well print it at that point. If you have a printer at home, or if you have paper, if you have the ability, print it, because obviously you liked it enough to share it. You liked it enough to go through all that work, print it. So I just started doing it for fun. Like when I'm able to, doing one print a day on whatever size paper I feel like, whatever type of paper I feel like, just to make the print. Now, the balancing act that I saw to this was pretty interesting. I think as we all look at the screens on our phones or our computers so much, we see so many photographs that we forget that these things are meant to be tactile, physical things. So when I started making these print a days, I would start getting messages from people. Oh, can I buy that print from you? Oh, can I get this one printed? Like, that would send the reminder to the viewer that, oh, like, these are meant to be printed. These aren't just digital images to look at on a screen. Like, this is how they're supposed to be. So I always thought that was so intriguing that through this process of just sharing prints and trying to motivate and remind people to go make prints, that the audience reaction was, oh, yeah, you make prints. Cool. Like, can I buy that? So that was just an amazing, like, domino effect that happened.
Stefon, you've been shooting professionally at what age? When did you start?
I mean, professionally, I think it's like, it's such a loosely defined thing. Like, because I was working for this production company, like when I was 21, 22, I guess you could say I was getting paid to make photographs. So maybe that's professionally. But for me, I don't know. I think, like, I don't know. It's interpretive. I don't know. I'm having a hard time with that one.
Well, let me take it another way, and this comes from one of the questions here. What would you say to if you could go back to when you started, when you were working for that production company, and then you branched out on your own? If you could go back and talk to that photographer, if you talk to yourself then, what advice would you have for yourself?
I would say explore and branch out to different subject matters and things earlier on. I think for a photographer, the moment you hit your stride with a certain type of subject matter, you kind of like just really go down that rabbit hole and follow it. Like if you make that one great sports photograph, like, okay, I'm going to keep doing this. And part of it maybe because like you feel like the audience wants to see more of that, or you might on your own head be thinking like, oh, okay, I'm good at this. Let me keep shooting this. You know, and I think it's healthy and it's encouraging to go shoot other things. Like, you know, if you always shoot models, go shoot still life, go shoot fruit bowls, go shoot flowers, like challenge yourself, you know, because that's the thing is like once we get into our habit and our routine of making what we feel are good photographs of something we're easily identifiable with, like excite yourself, because then it's going to be boring if it's just like, oh, I'm going to approach it the same way unless you're pushing yourself, you know? So to my younger self, I would say, yeah, you're having a niche at this, but go explore other things. go see what excites you elsewhere.
There's a lot of questions regarding the printers. Do you have a personal preference on where people can start versus intermediate or?
I would say there's two brands. I started off with Epson. I think it was like an 1800 or 1900 style printer. Epson and Canon both offer a printer for your budget. That's what I would probably say. Recently, I was Epson for years. Recently, I started using the Prograph 1000 and 2000. I've loved the results from that. And the biggest thing on the cost side of printing is there's no draining of ink when you're switching from matte to photo black. With the older Epsons, that was an issue you would have. If you wanted to use matte paper to print that photograph, you would have to wait 5 minutes or so for the ink to clear out of the head, and you're kind of like losing money at that point. But the Prograph 1000, 2000, I've been happy with, and I'm sure there's some models below those that are really good and affordable.
Stefon, I want to ask you, going back to the progression you've had as a photographer. I mean, you in many ways are a mini mogul. You've got over 500,000 followers. You've got your own fashion brand. Did that happen incrementally, or did you have a master plan of where you'd end up?
I had no plan of where to end up or how to navigate. Photography, recognizing the same passion that I had for it as, say, skateboarding, I value that. So around this bigger time of transition of things, being in bad situations years ago, like I just felt, okay, well, regardless of what's going on in my life at the time, between owing creditors tons of money, between, this was like around like 08, 09, like after that. So it's like, we're coming out of a recession. Financial times are super hard. I realized that, okay, well, if I have this thing, and regardless of whatever's going on in my life, I can go outside my door, go drive around the city, and go make photographs and escape negativity for a few hours a day. It was freedom. Like, this camera gave me freedom from any negatives in life. So there was no plan of, I'm going to do this and do that, because that's not the way I think. I was just like, this thing makes me happy. If I do this as much as I can, I'm sure I'll be in a better headspace than if I wasn't. I think it was a fortunate time with the explosion of social channels between Tumblr, Instagram, photography kind of blowing up in a different way than it had been in years. I was able to garner eyes or attention to some of the work that I was doing at the time. And that just led to a lot of opportunities between the skate and streetwear brands. And it was just really by chance that a lot of moments fell into place, but 100%, those things wouldn't have fallen into place without photography. And it wouldn't have happened, I think, if I approached it with, well, here's this thing, I'm pretty good at this. How do I make this make money for me? Because at the time it was like, I don't want to put pressures on this to make me money. I want this to be the escape and the self-fulfilling feeling that you can get from going out, making a photograph that you feel proud about. And that's solely it. It's not about, oh, I'm going to show this to everybody and be cool. Like, no, like, wow, I feel like I did something today that contributed to my happiness.
Can you speak a little bit about recent projects and collaborations that you have going on and what your approaches are? I mean, I imagine you're approached all the time from artists wanting to collaborate or brands wanting to collaborate. What are some collaborations you have going on now? And for people who want to work with you, what are you looking for?
So collaborations now just come as they come. Recently, I've been doing a lot more music projects. I've had the good opportunity to work with Rhymesayers to contribute my photography as album art for them. So that's been exciting to see, a vinyl layout, to see CDs laid out. Been shooting a lot of video work using the SL for that kind of stuff. So the collaborations have been coming in waves like that. Because I'm not a big fan of rushing collaborations. I think like when they come, they come. I've worked with a lot of great photographers for the visual side. Everything from Boogie, who's a classic photographer, to more contemporary people, 13th Witness, Trash Hand, Travis Jensen, Jason Peterson. Along the ways to make collaborative capsules of their work on T-shirts and skateboards and stickers. So the idea of collaborating, I think I just take them as they come. If they're organic and they feel real, that's when I'm excited to do it. If it's kind of like a forced thing, then it doesn't really intrigue me too much.
Are you starting to work more with video? I mean, you've shot many videos in the past, but can you speak to the differences in your approach between still and video?
Oh yes, it's been interesting. And 100%, I would have to give. This is a big shout out to Evidence, the LA-based rapper. Like, he saw the photographs I was making, and he pushed me to start making videos. And working with him. So for me, I'm a fan of his music, so it's easier to dive into that realm. But he was just like, what you're doing with your photographs, just make a move. So that was kind of it. And thankfully, some of the projects I've been working on with these guys, it's kind of been like, not necessarily a mood board or storyboard and shot list. It's really like how I approach photography. Like, what's the setting? How's the light coming in? Okay, we're going to shoot it this way. I'm catching these things, and we're going to do performance takes on this. I'm going to use the lens or use certain things to get an abstract kind of pull out of this. So it's been fun to explore this idea of moving imagery.
But are you storyboarding out everything, or is it more the mood board and you go?
No mood board, no nothing. Literally, like, because say, for example, if I was going to shoot with a model, they would say, well, what's the theme? What's this? And I would always say, I don't do that. Bring wardrobe that you like. I'll book a location that seems inspiring. And when we get there, we're going to figure it out on the spot. I like that excitement, because I think if you go into something with a really blank slate creatively in your head, you have more of an opportunity to make something original to yourself versus, does this look like this magazine cover we're referencing? Because once you see that, now you're always cross-referencing that for the most part. So I think if you go into an empty headspace, it's an open slate. Now I'm just going to make whatever at that time, at that moment, what's grabbing me.
Well, I got to tell you, my 16-year-old son, who is a hopeful video director, absolutely loves what you just said, because I've told him over and over again, you got to plan it out. He's going to go back to what you just said and said, I just got to get an idea and go make it happen.
Keep it cross-referencing. So I've done a few videos like that. Now I'm planning on working on some more videos with Evidence. So now we are going to go into that headspace of, well, let's try planning something out. Let's try figuring out transitions, crossing shots, like all this different stuff. So again, I've done that kind of workflow enough times where it's like, okay, I want something different now. Let me try something structured. Like, because something works a few times for you and you've proven that it works for you, don't keep doing it. It's good to switch it up. So the advice I would say to your son is, if he's already done, just walking in and doing it enough times where it works, there's nothing wrong with trying to see what the outcome is from doing a storyboard or structuring it a bit differently. I wasted so much paper and ink, like the first year of printing at home. One, not understanding the ICC profiles, maybe not switching the ink from matte to photo black, depending on the paper you're using. Then also your work, like zoom in on your work on your computer screen. You'll see like shutter blur. You'll see certain things that when it comes printed out, you're questioning like what's wrong with it. So I think it's trial and error. That's how you're going to get into a more routine, solid print workflow, is just keep practicing and trial and error. You're not going to get everything right the first time out, and you just got to troubleshoot and get past it. Then you'll find your groove.
So Stefon's got a website and he's got an Instagram. Go ahead and make sure you guys check out these links. And if you have a phone, you can QR code the corner there for our upcoming programs. So the hashtag we're looking at is Stay Home with Leica. Stefon Vanasco's website is visualskateboards.com. You can also contact him at Stefon Vanasco on Instagram directly and work something out if you want to get one of his fine pieces of artwork on your walls. Is there anything you'd like to add, Stefon, before we say goodbye to everybody? You want to issue them a challenge, maybe?
No challenge, but I definitely would suggest that if you've been toying with the idea of printing, go online to sammyscamera.com or bnh.com, whichever online retailer you like working with. Start exploring a printer, find one that is within your budget. And I would just suggest really dig into the idea of printing, and it's going to help your photography. It's going to help you grow. It's going to give you other opportunities. Definitely want to say thank you to Leica Academy USA, Leica Camera USA for reaching out and asking me to be a part of this. Again, I think it's a lot of we're all dealing with this time frame in a different way, and it's kind of nice to be able to get together with you guys and talk photography and talk the craft, and hopefully the people that came through today enjoyed hanging out and talking it up with us.
Great, awesome.
Yeah, I mean, do you want to do more questions, or do you want to You guys
Let's see what the crowd says here.
I got one for you. Let's try maybe 3 or 4 more questions, and then we'll wrap it up. Stefon, besides Fred Lyon, what other notable photographers has influenced your work?
Oh, I mean, 100%. A big influence. I mean, from skateboarding, it was like, say, Daniel Harold Sturt, his skateboarding work, subconsciously looking back, was like early on, was like really impactful. I will definitely say, without a doubt, Ralph Gibson's work has been and continues to be a motivational, inspirational idea to what photography can be. That it's the idea of making the photograph and not necessarily the moment defining the photograph. That, you know, his versatility between modeling work, you know, still life, architecture, that blew me away seeing his stuff. You know, also it's in, you know, Gary, the greats, Winogrand and Davidson, and, you know, but I also like Larry Clark. I love Ari Makopoulos. I love his work a ton. I mean, there's so many greats out there, but I would say Ralph played a heavy role in like eye-opening ways for photography for me.
Listen, everyone, I know that we didn't get to all of the questions you guys asked, almost 80 questions, but we've done our best to answer them here. There's going to be more opportunities to connect with Stefon, even with Instagram Lives, whether through Leica or through his own channel. I encourage you to check that out. I've got one last question for you, which is, when does a book come? When do we see a book?
It's in process. You know, with all the downtime that I've been having a lot more opportunity to sit and look through my photographs. So yeah, hopefully maybe by the end of all this quarantine being lifted, I might have something that I could send off to a printer and start scheduling. But yeah, I mean, that's been my main focus. Like, once we got the stay-at-home mandate, it's been like, all right, this is the time to sit and come up with an idea for a book. So, you know, hopefully I come out with something.
All right, Tom.
Hey, on behalf of the Academy, Stefon, thank you very much. Phil, you got any final words for us, and we'll say goodbye.
Stay home with Leica is the hashtag. If you guys missed this episode or the earlier part and you want to watch it, feel free to go to YouTube. Leica Camera USA does have a channel up there with videos. Other than that, check out Stefon Vanasco and follow him on Instagram at Stefon Vanasco. Yeah. And thank you so much for your time. This was fun.
Yeah. Love to be back at this again with you guys. So let me know if you need anything.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Everybody be well.
Thanks, everybody.